At 75, she lost her home. Then her dog refused to leave a wall. No one else noticed. The door had already closed behind her when Marjorie stepped onto the porch with a suitcase that wasn't even hers. No goodbye. No argument left to win. Just silence, and a German shepherd who wouldn't take his eyes off the people who turned her away. Days later, standing in front of a dead drive-in nobody wanted, he found something she didn't. What would you have done in her place? Walked away, or stayed and found out why? The suitcase wasn't hers. Marjorie Ellison knew that the moment she picked it up. Too light, too clean, too empty. It sat there on the porch like something waiting for a stranger, not a woman who had lived inside that house for nearly half her life. She stood beside it anyway. 75 years old, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't know where her hands were supposed to go. Behind her, the front door was still open, not wide, just enough to let the air move through, enough for her to hear the quiet shifting inside. A chair leg dragging, a cabinet closing, ordinary sounds, the kind she used to make herself. "Mom, it's just for a while," her son had said. He had said it from inside the house, not stepping out, not meeting her at the door. Just his voice floating past the smell of lemon cleaner and something baking that wasn't meant for her anymore. Marjorie hadn't answered. Because there are moments when words don't change anything. They just make it smaller. Her daughter-in-law stood a few feet back from him, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't look angry. That would have been easier to take. She looked finished. "We've talked about this," the woman had said earlier. "We need space. We need things to be manageable." Manageable. Marjorie turned that word over once in her mind. It felt neat, polite, like something you'd say when you didn't want to say the truth out loud. The truth had come anyway. It always does. "You're not safe here anymore," her daughter-in-law had added, softer this time, as if softness made it kinder. Not the way things are. Marjorie had looked down at her own hands then, at the faint tremor she couldn't quite hide anymore, at the skin that had gone thin and pale over the years. She had nodded. Not because she agreed. Because she understood what kind of moment it was. Now, standing on the porch, she shifted her weight once. The wood creaked beneath her feet, same as it always had. Same board. Third step in from the railing. She had fixed that board herself once. Years ago. Back when her husband was still alive and the house felt louder. She glanced down at it now. Still holding. Still doing its job. From across the street, a man in a faded blue shirt bent over his mailbox, pretending to sort through envelopes that had already been opened. His head stayed down longer than it needed to. 2 houses over, a woman watered a row of flowers that were already soaked. The hose ran steady, pooling at the base of the garden bed. Nobody looked directly at her, but she felt it. That quiet attention people give when something uncomfortable is happening and they don't know where to put their eyes. Kaiser shifted beside her. He hadn't made a sound the entire time. Not during the argument. Not when the suitcase was set outside. Not when the door opened and stayed open. He stood close to her leg now, shoulder pressed lightly against her calf. His fur was warm, solid, real. His ears were up, not aggressive, just alert. Watching. Marjorie followed his gaze, first to the man across the street, then to the woman with the hose, then back to the doorway behind her. Kaiser looked at each face once, carefully, as if he were storing them somewhere. "Come on, boy," she said quietly. Her voice surprised her. It came out steady, even. She bent, slow but practiced, and picked up the suitcase. The handle creaked a little in her grip. Behind her, the door moved. A small shift. A pause. Then click. The sound was soft, clean, final. Marjorie didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She had heard enough doors close in her life to know when one wasn't opening again. Kaiser let out a low breath through his nose. Not quite a sigh. Something heavier. He stepped forward before she did. Just one step, then stopped, waiting. Marjorie adjusted her hold on the suitcase and took her first step off the porch. The wood creaked again, familiar in a way that made her chest tighten for half a second before she pushed it down. Second step. Third. Her shoes hit the walkway with a dull, hollow sound. Gravel crunched beneath her feet as she reached the edge of the yard. The mailbox stood where it always had, white paint chipped along the edges, the number still slightly crooked. She paused there, just for a moment. Not long enough for anyone to notice, not long enough to turn into something bigger. Then she kept walking. Kaiser stayed at her side, close enough that she could feel the steady rhythm of his movement beside her. At the end of the street, a car passed. The sound of tires on asphalt rose and faded again. Normal. Everything around her was normal. That was the strange part. The sky hadn't changed. The houses hadn't shifted. The world hadn't stopped to mark anything. Only one thing was different. She no longer belonged to the place she had just left. Kaiser glanced back once, just once. Then he turned forward again, matching her pace. Marjorie didn't look back. She walked until the house was out of sight, until the street bent just enough to hide it. And even then she kept walking, because there wasn't anything behind her anymore, only the sound of a door closing, and the quiet space it left behind. Marjorie walked until her legs reminded her they were 75 years old. Then she walked a little farther. The town shifted slowly around her. Streets gave way to wider roads. Houses turned into storefronts, then into long stretches of parking lots and low buildings with flickering signs. Kaiser stayed close, never pulling, never lagging. Every now and then, he glanced up at her, just to check. She didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. By the time the light began to fade, she found her car where she had left it earlier that week, parked behind a grocery store, tucked near a row of shopping carts that rattled every time the wind picked up. The sedan was old, paint worn thin along the hood. One of the rear doors didn't quite close right unless you pushed it twice. But it started. And for now, that was enough. She set the suitcase in the back seat, paused with her hand on the doorframe, then eased herself into the driver's seat. The upholstery smelled faintly of dust and something older. Something settled in. Kaiser climbed in after her without being asked, turning once before lying down across the back seat, his head resting near the suitcase. Marjorie sat there a moment. Hands on the wheel. Not turning the key yet. Just sitting. The parking lot lights flickered on, one by one, casting a dull yellow glow across the cracked asphalt. She reached forward and turned the ignition. The engine coughed, hesitated, then caught. It was a sound she trusted. The first night, she didn't drive anywhere. She leaned the seat back as far as it would go, folded her coat under her head, and let sleep come in pieces. Not deep. not easy. Kaiser stayed alert longer than she did. His ears moved at every passing car, every distant cart clatter. Once he let out a low growl when footsteps passed too close. Marjorie reached back, resting her hand on his shoulder. "Easy," she murmured. He settled. Sometime near dawn, she drifted off for real. The second night was colder. She drove a little farther that day, found a laundromat near the edge of town, one of those places that never quite closed. The windows fogged from the inside, the hum of machines constant. She went in mostly for the heat. The smell hit her first. Warm detergent, damp fabric, that clean, artificial scent that lingered in the air long after the machines stopped. She sat near the back, feeding a few coins into a dryer she didn't need just for the excuse to stay. Kaiser lay at her feet, chin resting on his paws, eyes half closed, but never fully asleep. Across the room, a television hung crooked in the corner, mounted too high. The volume was low, but the subtitles rolled across the bottom of the screen. Local news. Marjorie didn't pay attention at first. She watched the drum spin instead, clothes tumbling in slow, steady rhythm, back and forth, over and over. There was something calming about it, something predictable. County tax auction scheduled this Thursday, the caption read. Her eyes lifted, several properties listed, including commercial lots and abandoned structures. She shifted slightly in her seat, notable listing, former drive-in theater on Route 18. The image changed. A grainy photograph filled the screen. A wide, empty lot. Tall screen in the distance. Faded. Cracked. Marjorie leaned forward without realizing it. Kaiser's head lifted too. Sunset Ridge Drive-In. Property has remained unused for over a decade. County officials note structural concerns and significant back taxes. The screen flickered. The image held just long enough. Something about it. She couldn't name it. But it settled somewhere deep, quiet, familiar in a way that didn't make sense. The dryer buzzer went off beside her. She didn't move. Thursday came faster than she expected. The county building wasn't much to look at. Low brick, flat roof, a flag out front that moved lazily in the wind. Inside, the room was half full. Metal chairs, folding tables, a few men in worn jackets. A woman near the back flipping through paperwork she clearly understood better than anyone else there. The air smelled faintly of coffee that had been sitting too long. Marjorie took a seat in the last row. Kaiser stayed close, lying beside her chair, unnoticed or simply ignored. Names were called, properties listed, bids made and dismissed, most of it blurred together. Until Sunset Ridge Drive-In, 9 acres, structure listed as unsafe, sold as is. A low ripple moved through the room. A man near the front let out a short laugh. Thought they'd never unload that mess, someone muttered. Place ought to be bulldozed, another voice added. Marjorie sat still. The auctioneer glanced up briefly, scanning the room. Opening bid, $200. Silence. Not the uncertain kind, the settled kind. People shifted in their seats, looked down at their papers, cleared their throats. Nobody moved. Marjorie felt something rise in her chest. Not fear, not quite. Something closer to recognition. She didn't know why, but she knew it was there. Kaiser shifted beside her, not restless, just alert. His ears angled forward, his body stilled. Marjorie's hand rested lightly on her lap. Then, slowly, she raised it. The motion felt small, but in the room, it landed heavy. Heads turned. All at once. The man who had laughed earlier twisted in his chair, looking her over from head to toe. The auctioneer paused. "You understand the condition of the property, ma'am?" he asked, voice careful now. Marjorie nodded. "I do." A beat passed. 200 from the lady in the back, he said. No one followed. No one even pretended to. Going once. Stillness. Going twice. A longer pause this time, as if giving her a chance to take it back. She didn't. Sold. The gavel came down. The sound echoed sharper than it should have, and just like that, it was hers. A few quiet chuckles drifted through the room. Not cruel, just certain. Marjorie lowered her hand. Kaiser leaned lightly against her leg. Steady. Present. She didn't look around. Didn't need to. She already knew what they saw. An old woman. With nothing. Buying something worse. But as she sat there, waiting for the paperwork to be pushed toward her, she realized something else. For the first time since the door had closed behind her, she wasn't standing still anymore. She was moving, even if she didn't yet know where it would lead. The directions were simple enough on paper. Route 18 until the road thinned out. Past the last gas station, past the rusted grain silo, then keep going until there was nothing left that looked like it belonged to anyone. Marjorie followed them slowly. The sedan hummed beneath her hands, steady but tired, the kind of engine that had learned how to last by not asking for too much. Kaiser sat upright in the back seat now, not lying down anymore. Watching. The town slipped behind them in pieces. First the storefronts, then the scattered houses, then long stretches of dry land that seemed to breathe dust with every passing truck. The sky opened up wider the farther they went. No buildings to break it. No trees tall enough to interrupt it. Just a long, pale blue stretch that felt bigger than it needed to be. Marjorie adjusted her grip on the wheel. The road narrowed. The pavement turned rough, then gravel. The sound changed immediately, tires crunching, small stones tapping against the undercarriage. Kaiser shifted again. Ears up. Body still. Marjorie slowed the car. The land on either side had gone flat and dry. Grass the color of old straw moved in uneven patches with the wind. Fence posts leaned at angles that suggested they hadn't been touched in years. A broken sign appeared up ahead. Half of it missing, the rest faded beyond reading. She drove past it anyway. Then, just beyond a bend where the road dipped slightly, she saw it. At first, it didn't look like anything. Just a shape rising out of the land. Too straight to be natural, too large to ignore. She eased her foot off the gas. The car rolled forward slowly, and then it came into full view. The screen. It stood alone, taller than anything around it. A massive rectangle of weathered white, split down the middle by a long, jagged crack that ran from top to bottom like a scar that had never healed. The paint had gone gray with time, peeling in places, exposed wood showing through in others. It didn't look abandoned. It looked left behind. The lot stretched out in front of it. Wide. Empty. Rows of low mounds where cars had once parked were barely visible under the overgrown grass. The old speaker poles still stood, scattered across the field, their metal arms bent and hanging like broken limbs. A few of the speakers still dangled from their cords. Most didn't. The wind moved through them, creating a faint, hollow clinking sound, like something trying to remember what it used to be. Marjorie brought the car to a stop near the entrance. There was no gate, just two posts on either side of the dirt path, leaning slightly inward as if they had given up trying to hold anything back. She turned off the engine. The silence settled immediately. Not quiet, not peaceful, just empty. Kaiser didn't move right away. He stayed in the back seat, staring out through the windshield. His body had gone tight. Marjorie reached for the door handle and stepped out slowly. The air felt different here. Drier, stiller. It carried a faint smell of dust and something older beneath it. Something faintly sour, like grease that had soaked into wood and never quite left. She walked a few steps forward. The ground shifted under her shoes, dry grass bending, dirt loose and uneven. Kaiser jumped down beside her. He didn't stay at her side. Instead, he moved ahead a few steps, then stopped, looked back, then moved again. Marjorie watched him. "Go on," she said quietly. He did. Not running, not wandering, moving with purpose. She followed. The lot opened up as they walked farther in. The size of it became clearer. It had once held something. People, cars, noise. Now it held nothing. At the far end, near the base of the screen, Kaiser slowed. His nose dropped toward the ground. He moved in a small circle, paused, then shifted slightly to the right. Marjorie kept walking, but her eyes stayed on him now. He stopped again, this time longer. Then he turned his head and looked at her. Not confused, not asking, just waiting. She took a few more steps toward him. The base of the screen loomed above them now. Up close, it felt even larger. The crack down the middle was wider than it had looked from the road, deep enough to catch shadows inside it. She reached out and touched the surface lightly. The wood was rough, dry, warm from the sun. It didn't give. Kaiser moved again. Not far, just a few feet to the left. He sniffed once more, then sat. Right there. Marjorie frowned slightly. "You tired already?" she asked. He didn't respond. Didn't lie down. Just sat still. She watched him for a moment longer, then let it go. There would be time. Right now, she needed to see the rest. The concession stand sat off to one side. Low, block-shaped, windows boarded up with mismatched planks. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Marjorie pushed it open. It resisted at first, then gave with a slow, drawn-out creak. The smell hit her immediately. Old oil, dust, something damp, the kind of air that had been trapped too long without anyone to disturb it. She stepped inside. Light filtered through gaps in the boards, casting thin lines across the floor. The counter still stood where it had always been. A faded menu board hung behind it, letters missing, prices barely visible. Popcorn, soda, hot dogs, all from another time. She set her hand on the counter. A thin layer of dust coated the surface, untouched. Behind the counter, a doorway led to a small back room. She stepped through. The space was narrow, bare. A few shelves lined one wall, mostly empty except for a handful of old paper cups collapsed in on themselves. The roof above held. Mostly. One corner showed signs of water damage, the wood darkened and soft. But the rest, it would do. For now. Marjorie turned slowly, taking it all in. This was it. This was what she had bought. 9 acres of quiet. A broken screen. a room that smelled like the past. And something else. Something she couldn't quite place yet. Outside, Kaiser let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a whine, just a note. She stepped back through the doorway and out into the light. He was still near the base of the screen. Same spot, same stillness, waiting. Marjorie stood there for a moment. Then she exhaled slowly. "All right," she said, more to herself than to him. She turned back toward the concession stand. The sun was dropping lower now, stretching long shadows across the lot. The air cooled just enough to notice. She would need to settle in before dark. She walked back inside, set the suitcase down behind the counter, and began clearing a small space on the floor. One step at a time. One corner at a time. Outside, Kaiser didn't move. He stayed where he was, watching that same place, as if the land itself had said something to him, and he was the only one who had heard it. Marjorie watched Kaiser a moment longer, then she turned away. Not because she didn't care, because she didn't yet know what to do with what she was seeing. There are things you learn over time, things you don't rush. And right now, she needed something simpler. Water. A place to sleep. A way to get through the night. The first morning came slow. The cold woke her before the light did. It crept in through the boards, through the cracks in the walls, through the thin blanket she had wrapped around herself sometime in the dark. Her joints complained when she sat up. A quiet, familiar ache. Nothing new. She rubbed her hands together once, then pushed herself to her feet. Outside, the air had changed. Cooler, sharper, the kind of morning that made everything look cleaner than it really was. Kaiser stood a few yards from the building, facing the screen again. Same place, same posture. Marjorie stepped out onto the dirt, pulling her coat tighter around her. "You're up early," she said. He didn't turn right away, just flicked an ear. Then slowly, he looked back at her and walked over. Not hurried, not reluctant, just done with whatever he had been doing. For now. Water came next. She had noticed the old pump the day before, set near the far edge of the property. Half hidden by weeds, the handle rusted but still attached. She walked toward it with Kaiser following close behind. The ground dipped slightly there, softer underfoot. She wrapped her hand around the handle. Cold metal. Rough. She pushed down. Nothing. Tried again. The second time, it moved. Barely. The third time, it gave more. A hollow sound echoed beneath the ground. She kept going. Slow, steady movements, up, down, up, down. The rhythm came back to her without thinking, like something she had learned long ago and never fully forgot. After a dozen strokes, a cough, then a thin stream of water. Brown at first, then clearer. Marjorie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Well," she murmured, "that's something." She cupped her hands and let the water run over them. Cold enough to sting. Real enough to matter. Kaiser stepped forward, sniffed once, then drank. The days began to take shape after that. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Marjorie moved through the property slowly, learning what it offered and what it didn't. The back room of the concession stand became hers. She cleared a corner first, pushed aside old debris with her shoe, wiped down a section of floor with a rag torn from an old shirt she found in the car. It wasn't much, but it was a place. At night, she locked the door from the inside. That mattered more than anything. Food was simple. Whatever she had left, whatever she could stretch. She ate slowly, carefully, not out of fear, out of habit. Kaiser stayed close now, closer than before. He still wandered during the day, but not far, always circling back, always checking, and always stopping at that same spot near the base of the screen. Every time, without fail. Marjorie noticed. Of course she did. But she didn't go to him. Not yet. There's a difference between seeing something and being ready to face it. On the third day, she drove back into town. The trip felt shorter this time, or maybe she just wasn't counting the distance the same way. The diner sat on the corner just off the main road. Low roof, wide windows. A sign that had probably been red once, now faded into something softer. Inside, the air was warm. The smell of coffee hit her first. Then bacon. Then something sweet baking in the back. She paused just inside the door. Long enough for someone to notice. A woman behind the counter looked up. Mid-50s maybe. Hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp but not unkind. She took Marjorie in with a single glance, then nodded toward a stool. "Sit," she said, "before you change your mind." Marjorie did. The stool creaked under her, but held. The woman poured coffee without asking, set it down in front of her. Black. Hot. Marjorie wrapped her hands around the mug, let the heat settle into her fingers. "You're the one out at the drive-in," the woman said, wiping down the counter. Not a question. Marjorie nodded once. "That's me." The woman leaned slightly against the counter. "Name's Clara Vance," she said, "and you look like you haven't had a proper meal in a few days." Marjorie started to speak, stopped, then said, "I can pay." Clara waved that off before she finished the sentence. "You can eat first," she said. "Worry about the rest later." A plate appeared a minute later. Eggs, toast, something fried and crispy on the side. Marjorie didn't rush it, didn't need to. She ate steady, quiet. Clara didn't press her, didn't ask questions she didn't want answered, just stayed nearby. Present. That alone was something. Word traveled. It always does. By the time Marjorie left the diner, she could feel it, eyes following her just a little longer than usual. Conversations dipping when she passed. Not hostile, just curious and uncertain. Back at the drive-in, Kaiser met her near the entrance. He didn't bark, didn't jump, just walked up and pressed against her side for a moment, then moved away, back toward the screen. Same place, same spot. Marjorie stood there, watching him. Longer this time. He lowered his head, sniffed once, then sat. Again. She exhaled slowly. "All right," she said under her breath. Not to him, to herself. There was something there. She knew it now. Not just a habit. Not just a coincidence. Something real. Something he understood before she did. But whatever it wasn't going anywhere. And neither was she. Not yet. Marjorie turned back toward the concession stand. The sun dipped lower behind her, stretching her shadow across the empty lot. Behind her, Kaiser stayed where he was. Watching. Waiting. Like he had all the time in the world. And like he already knew. She would come back to that spot eventually, The wind picked up that evening. Not sudden, not violent, just steady. It moved through the tall grass in long waves, brushing against the speaker poles and pulling faint metal sounds from them, thin, uneven notes that rose and fell like something trying to speak and forgetting how. Marjorie stood just outside the concession stand, watching the light drain slowly from the sky. She had eaten. She had water. She had a place to lie down. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because Kaiser hadn't moved. Not far, anyway. He had gone to that same place near the base of the screen just before sunset, and stayed there. No wandering. No circling. Just standing. Waiting. She crossed her arms, more out of habit than cold, and watched him. The distance between them wasn't much. 30 feet, maybe. But it felt farther. The kind of distance that doesn't come from space, but from not understanding. "Kaiser," she called, her voice carried across the empty lot. He didn't come. Didn't even shift his weight. Just stood there, facing the same section of wall. Still. Marjorie let out a slow breath. "All right," she said, quieter this time. She stepped off the worn patch of dirt and started toward him. The ground felt different as she got closer. Softer in places. Uneven. The grass thinner near the base of the screen, worn down as if something, or someone, had been there often. She slowed as she approached. Kaiser didn't turn this time. Didn't acknowledge her at all. His body had gone rigid. Head low, eyes fixed forward. She followed his line of sight. At first, she saw nothing. Just the base of the screen. Weathered wood. Gray with age. Then, she stepped a little closer, angled slightly to the side, and something shifted. Not the wall. Her view of it. One section looked off. Subtle. Easy to miss. But once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. The wood there wasn't as worn. Not as splintered. The color was different. Faintly. Like it hadn't been exposed as long as the rest. Marjorie moved closer. Reached out. Her fingers brushed the surface. It felt smoother, less brittle. She pressed her palm against it. The wall didn't give, but it didn't feel the same either. She leaned in, studying the edges. That's when she saw it. The seam. Thin. Running vertical along one side, then another along the bottom. Not part of the original structure. Added later. Carefully. Deliberately. Kaiser let out a low sound. Not a bark. A warning. Soft but steady. Marjorie glanced at him. "You've been trying to tell me, haven't you?" she murmured. His ears flicked once. That was all. She turned back to the wall. Ran her hand along the seam again. Her fingers caught on something. A small ridge. She leaned closer. Paint. But not the same paint as the rest. This had been brushed over something, covering it. She scratched lightly with her nail. The top layer flaked just enough to reveal metal beneath. A screw head, painted over. Hidden. Her hand stilled. For a moment, the wind was the only sound. Moving through the lot, through the broken speakers, through the empty space where people used to be. Someone had sealed this. Not boarded it up to keep weather out. Not patched it to fix damage. Sealed, closed, on purpose. Marjorie straightened slowly. Her heart had picked up, though she couldn't say why. There was no immediate danger, no threat she could see. And yet, something about it felt intentional. She pressed both hands flat against the wood and pushed. Nothing. Solid. Whoever had done this had meant for it to stay closed. Kaiser stepped closer now, not in front of her, beside her, his shoulder nearly touching her leg. He looked at the wall, then at her, then back again. Waiting. Marjorie exhaled slowly. "Not tonight," she said. Her voice was quiet, but firm. She wasn't afraid. Not exactly. But she knew the difference between curiosity and readiness. And this, whatever this was going to take more than a few minutes and fading light. She stepped back. Kaiser didn't follow right away. He stayed where he was, watching the wall. Then, after a moment, he turned. Came back to her side. Reluctantly. Together, they walked back toward the concession stand. The sky had gone darker now, deep blue fading into black at the edges. Stars beginning to show through. Inside, the air felt warmer, safer. Marjorie closed the door behind them, set the makeshift latch in place, then stood there for a moment, her hand still resting on the wood, listening. Nothing. Just the wind. Just the quiet. She moved back to her corner, sat down slowly, and pulled the blanket over her legs. Kaiser lay near the door, not curled up, not fully at rest. Alert. As always, Marjorie leaned back against the wall. Closed her eyes for a moment. But the image stayed with her. That seam. Those painted-over screws. The way the wood didn't match. The way Kaiser had stood there like he already knew what was behind it. Her eyes opened again. She stared at the door, then toward the direction of the screen beyond it. Something was there. Not just hidden. Kept. And for reasons she didn't understand yet, it had been waiting. She lay down slowly, turning onto her side. Sleep didn't come easy. It came in pieces. Broken, shallow. Each time she drifted off, she felt like she was forgetting something important. And each time she woke, Kaiser was still there. Still watching. Still listening. As if whatever lay beyond that wall might not be the only thing that hadn't been touched in a long time. Morning came slower than usual. The kind of morning that doesn't rush you out of bed. It pulls you up piece by piece. Marjorie sat up, her back stiff, her hands lingering in her lap before she moved. Kaiser was already awake. Of course he was. He stood near the door, not pacing this time, waiting. When she reached for the latch, he stepped aside. Not eager, not restless. Certain. The air outside carried that early dryness again. Cool, but not cold. The sky stretched pale and wide, with just enough light to soften the edges of everything. Marjorie didn't go to the pump, didn't check the building, didn't do any of the things she had settled into the day before. Instead, she walked straight toward the screen. Kaiser moved ahead of her, not leading, not pulling, just staying exactly where he needed to be. When they reached the spot, he stopped. Same place, same posture. The wall stood quiet in front of them. Unchanged, as if the night hadn't touched it at all. Marjorie exhaled slowly. "All right," she said under her breath. This time, she didn't stop. It took her most of the morning just to figure out where to begin. There were no tools waiting for her, no easy edges to pull apart, just wood, old and new layered together. She found a piece of scrap metal near the concession stand, a bent length of something that might have once been part of a shelf. It wasn't much, but it had weight. She brought it back to the wall. Kaiser watched. Close, but not in the way. Marjorie pressed the edge of the metal into the seam. Nothing. She adjusted her angle, pressed harder. The wood groaned slightly, not breaking, but not entirely silent either. She leaned in, putting more of her weight behind it. Her shoulder protested. Her hands tightened. "Come on," she murmured. The metal slipped once, caught again. And this time, something gave, just a fraction. But enough. She paused, listened. Nothing but the wind. She worked the edge deeper slowly, carefully. The first screw came loose with a sharp, sudden crack that echoed more than it should have. She froze. Heart steady, but aware. Kaiser didn't react, didn't flinch. That told her more than anything. She kept going. One screw, then another. Some didn't turn at all. Paint sealed over them, rust holding them tight. Those she worked around. Prying, pressing. Letting the wood do what it would eventually do anyway, give in to time. It took hours. Her hands grew sore. Her breath came shorter, but she didn't stop. Because by then, it wasn't just curiosity. It was something else. Something that had been building since the moment Kaiser first sat at that spot. Something that said, "This matters." When the final section loosened, it didn't fall away. It shifted. Just enough to create a narrow gap. Dark inside. Still. Marjorie stepped back. Her chest rose and fell once, then again. Kaiser moved forward. Not rushing, just stepping closer. He stopped at the edge of the opening, looked in, then stepped aside, giving her space. Marjorie reached for the flashlight she had brought with her, clicked it on. The beam cut into the darkness and stopped. Not on emptiness, on shape. A wall. Closer than she expected. She leaned in slightly, widening the gap just enough to slip through. The wood scraped against her shoulder as she moved inside. The air changed immediately. Cooler. Heavier. The kind of air that hadn't moved in years. Dust hung in it. Faint. Undisturbed. Her boots touched the floor. Solid. Concrete. The beam of light moved slowly. Left, right, forward. And then she saw it. A bed. Not a pile of boards, not a collapsed frame. A bed. Narrow. Simple, but made. Blanket folded at the end. Carefully. Beside it, a crate turned on its side. On top of it, a small cooking surface, a metal plate, a cup, set in place as if someone might return at any moment. Marjorie didn't move for a few seconds. Her breath quiet. Measured. The light shifted again, and the walls came into view. Covered. Every inch of them. Photographs. Not scattered. Not random. Placed. Row after row. Faces. People sitting in cars. Children leaning out windows. Couples pressed close together. Families sharing blankets. All of them looking in the same direction, toward something outside the frame, toward the light. Marjorie stepped forward, slowly. Her eyes moved from one image to the next. Each one held a moment, a feeling, something alive, captured and kept. Kaiser entered behind her. His paws made no sound on the floor. He walked past her, not wandering, not exploring, straight to the far side of the room. Then he sat. Calm, settled, like he had reached the end of something. Marjorie followed his movement. There, against the wall, a metal box, not large but solid, closed. A lock still intact, untouched by time in the way everything else had been. She approached it slowly. Her hand hovered just above the surface, then lowered. The metal was cold. Colder than it should have been. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she looked back at the room, at the bed, at the photographs, at the quiet life that had existed here, hidden, sealed away, on purpose. Her throat tightened slightly, not from fear, from something deeper, something she couldn't name yet. Kaiser shifted once, not restless, just present. Marjorie let out a slow breath. This wasn't storage, she said quietly. The words didn't echo. The room held them. This was someone's place. She stood there a moment longer, then turned back toward the box, her hand resting on it again. This time she didn't pull away. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just something hidden. It was something left. And somehow, without knowing how, she understood one thing clearly. It hadn't been left for just anyone. It had been left for someone who would come looking. And for reasons she still didn't understand, that someone had become her. Marjorie didn't move right away. Her hand stayed on the metal box. Cold, solid, real. Behind her, the room held its silence like it had been doing for years. No shifting wood, no distant hum, just the faint, unmoving weight of a place that had been sealed and left alone. Kaiser sat near the wall, watching her. Not the box, her. As if whatever came next wasn't about what was inside, but about what she would do. Marjorie drew in a slow breath. Then she looked down. The lock was still intact, not rusted through, not broken, just closed. She ran her fingers along the edge, found the latch. Tested it. It didn't give. She glanced around the room. There had to be something. People didn't live like this without leaving a way back in. Her eyes moved across the shelves, the crate, the narrow bed. Then a small tin sat tucked beneath the corner of the cot. She stepped over, crouched slowly, and pulled it out. The lid came off easier than she expected. Inside, loose objects, a spoon, a folded cloth, and a key, small, plain, but clean. As if it had been handled more recently than anything else in the room. Marjorie stared at it for a second, then stood. Walked back to the box. Her hand didn't shake as much as she thought it might. The key slid in, turned, with a soft, final click. The sound felt louder than it was. Kaiser shifted slightly. Marjorie lifted the lid. Inside, not chaos, not clutter. Order. Neat stacks. Bundles of bills, wrapped and set in rows. Old coins, heavy and dull with age. Paper envelopes tied with string. She didn't reach in right away. She just looked. Because it wasn't the money that caught her. It was the care. The way everything had been placed. Deliberate. Preserved. She reached in slowly and lifted one of the envelopes. The paper was soft at the edges. Handled many times, she untied the string, opened it. Inside, a letter. Handwritten, careful. The ink slightly faded but steady. She unfolded it and began to read. My name is Leonard Pike. If you're reading this, then you found your way in. That means you didn't just pass by. You stopped. You looked. You stayed long enough to ask why. That matters. Marjorie's eyes moved slower after that. Each word settling before the next came. I built this place with my own hands. Not because it was smart, not because it made sense, but because it gave people something they didn't know they needed. A place to sit in the dark together. A place to remember they weren't alone. She paused. The room around her seemed to press in closer. Kaiser didn't move. I kept what I could. Not to be rich, not to hold on, but because I knew one day I wouldn't be able to keep it going. And I didn't trust anyone else to do it. So I waited. Marjorie swallowed. Her fingers tightened slightly on the paper. I waited for someone who didn't come looking for profit. Someone who didn't see this place as something to tear down. Someone who felt it before they understood it. If that's you, then what's here isn't just money. It's a promise. Keep the light on. That's all that matters. The letter ended there. No signature flourish. Just a name. Leonard Pike. Marjorie lowered the paper slowly. Her eyes didn't leave it, but her thoughts had already moved somewhere else. Back to the walls. The photographs. She turned, walked closer. The beam of the flashlight moved across the rows again. Faces. Moments. Laughter caught mid-frame. She stepped closer to one section. Something about it. Familiar. She raised the light slightly. And then she saw it. A younger woman, standing beside a man. The screen glowing behind them. Her hair darker. Her posture lighter. Her hand resting on his arm. The man beside her, tall, steady, smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. Marjorie's breath caught. She stepped closer. The image didn't change, didn't blur. It stayed exactly what it was. Her and Thomas. 40 years younger. Standing under that same screen. Alive in a moment she had almost forgotten. Her fingers lifted slowly, hovered over the photograph. Didn't quite touch it. I remember this, she whispered. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. The warmth, the sound of cars around them, the feeling of sitting still while the world moved quietly in the dark. She closed her eyes for a second. Just one. Then opened them again. The room looked different now. Not just hidden, not just preserved, connected. Kaiser stood and walked over. He stopped beside her, looked up at the photograph, then at her. Marjorie let out a slow breath. This wasn't random, she said quietly. Her voice steadier now. I didn't just end up here. Kaiser leaned lightly against her leg. The weight grounding. Certain. She turned back toward the box. The money inside no longer looked the same. It wasn't just something left behind. It was something meant to continue. Something unfinished. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, but didn't tie it shut. Not yet. Because for the first time since she stepped onto that porch, she wasn't standing in the aftermath of something ending. She was standing in the middle of something that had been waiting. And somehow, without planning it, without understanding it at first, she had found her way back to a place that already knew her name. The morning felt different. Not brighter, not lighter, just clearer. Marjorie stepped out of the hidden room and into the open air, blinking once as the sunlight met her eyes. The wind had settled overnight, leaving the land still in a way that made every sound sharper. Kaiser followed close behind. He didn't return to the spot this time. Didn't sit. Didn't wait. He stayed with her. That alone told her something had shifted. She walked across the lot slowly, her eyes moving over everything she had already seen, but now, seeing it differently. The screen didn't look broken anymore. It looked unfinished. The concession stand didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. Even the speaker poles, bent and leaning, didn't seem like remnants. They felt like something that had been left mid-sentence. She reached the car and opened the trunk, pulled out a small cloth and wiped her hands. Not because they were dirty, because she needed a moment to steady herself. The letter sat folded in her coat pocket. She could feel it there, like something alive. She drove into town just before noon. The road felt shorter again. Or maybe she was thinking less about the distance now. Clara's diner was busier than it had been the day before. A couple of trucks parked out front. Two men in work jackets sat near the window. The bell above the door rang as she stepped inside. Clara looked up immediately, took one look at Marjorie's face, and paused. "You find something," she said. Not asked. Marjorie slid onto the same stool as before. Kaiser settled beside her, head low but eyes moving. "I did," Marjorie replied. Clara poured coffee without turning away, set it down, waited. Marjorie reached into her pocket, pulled out the envelope. Not the money, just the letter. She placed it on the counter. Clara didn't touch it right away. She looked at Marjorie first, then at the envelope, then back again. "Go on," she said. Marjorie nodded. "Someone lived there," she said, "inside the screen, behind a wall." Clara's hand stilled slightly on the counter. "Kept everything," Marjorie continued. "Photos, notes, money too, but that's not what it was." She slid the envelope closer. It was a promise. Clara picked it up then, opened it carefully. Read slow. Her expression didn't change much, but something behind her eyes did. When she finished, she folded it again the same way it had been. Set it down between them. "Leonard Pike," she said quietly. "I remember that name." Marjorie looked up. "He used to run that place," Clara added. "Long before things started closing up around here. People talked about him like he was stubborn, but not in a bad way." She tapped the letter once. "Looks like he never really stopped." Marjorie nodded. "He was waiting," she said. Clara gave a small, thoughtful hum. Sounds like he found who he was waiting for. Marjorie didn't answer, because she wasn't sure yet what that meant. The bell above the door rang again. But this time, the sound carried differently. Heavier, more deliberate. Both women turned. A man stepped inside. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Tall, clean lines. Everything about him pressed and in place. His shoes didn't belong on this floor. His coat didn't belong in this room. He paused just inside the door, scanning once. Then his eyes landed on Marjorie and stayed there. Clara straightened slightly behind the counter. The room shifted, quieted. The man walked forward, each step measured, unhurried, but certain. He stopped a few feet from Marjorie. "Mrs. Ellison," he said. His voice was smooth, controlled, like someone used to being listened to. Marjorie didn't turn fully, just enough to meet his eyes. "Yes?" "My name is Ethan Crowell," he said. "I believe you recently acquired a property just outside town." He didn't need to say which one. Marjorie nodded once. "I did." Ethan gave a small, polite smile. "I'd like to speak with you about it." Clara didn't move, didn't leave. She simply stayed where she was, wiping the same spot on the counter that was already clean. Marjorie took a sip of her coffee. Let the silence stretch just long enough. "About what?" she asked. Ethan reached into his coat, pulled out a folded document, set it gently on the counter between them. "About making your situation easier," he said. Marjorie didn't touch it. Ethan continued. "That property has considerable potential, commercial interest, development possibilities. It's not ideally suited for someone in your position." He let that settle, then added, "I'm prepared to offer you a fair price, one that would ensure your comfort moving forward." Kaiser's head lifted, not sharply, but enough. His body didn't tense, didn't growl. But his eyes, they fixed on Ethan. Still, unblinking. Marjorie noticed. Of course she did. She set her cup down slowly. "And what would you do with it?" she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Repurpose the land," he said. "Something practical, sustainable, something that benefits the area." He didn't say, tear it down. He didn't need to. Marjorie looked at the document again, then at Clara, then back at Ethan. "And you're offering me this, now?" she asked. Ethan gave a slight nod. "Before complications arise," he said. "Before others take interest. It's a clean transaction. Immediate." The word hung there. Immediate. No waiting. No uncertainty. No nights on a hard floor. No cold mornings. Marjorie's hand moved slightly toward the paper, then stopped. Kaiser shifted. Just a fraction. But enough. She glanced down at him. He hadn't moved closer, hadn't made a sound. But his presence, it held. Steady. Grounded. She looked back at Ethan. Then slowly, she pushed the paper back toward him. "I'm not ready to sell," she said. Ethan's smile didn't disappear. But it changed. Subtly. "That's understandable," he replied. "But I would advise you not to wait too long. Opportunities like this don't tend to stay open." Marjorie held his gaze. "I've waited a long time for things I didn't understand," she said. "I don't mind waiting a little longer for something I do." The room stayed quiet. Clara didn't speak. Ethan nodded once, folded the paper, slipped it back into his coat. "If you change your mind," he said, "you know where to find me." He turned, walked out the same way he had come in. Measured. Certain. The bell rang once as the door closed behind him. Marjorie exhaled slowly. Clara leaned forward slightly. "That man doesn't come into places like this unless he's already decided something," she said. Marjorie nodded. "I figured." She reached for her coffee again, but didn't drink. Outside, the sky stretched wide and quiet. Somewhere beyond it, a broken screen waited, a hidden room, a letter, a promise. And for the first time since she stepped onto that porch, Marjorie understood something clearly. This wasn't about what she had lost. It was about what she had found, and what she would choose to do with it. Marjorie drove back slower than usual, not because the road had changed, because she had. The sedan rolled over the gravel, dust lifting behind her in soft, drifting clouds. The land stretched out the same way it always had, flat, open, quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt waiting. Kaiser sat upright again in the back seat. Calm. No tension in his shoulders now, no restless shifting, just steady. When the screen came into view, Marjorie didn't slow. She drove straight in. Parked near the center of the lot this time, not at the edge, not near the exit, in the middle. As if she already knew she wasn't leaving. She stepped out. The air carried a faint warmth now, late afternoon settling in. The wind had eased again, leaving the space still enough that every sound, the crunch of gravel, the creak of metal, stood on its own. Kaiser moved beside her. No hesitation, no pulling away. Together they walked toward the screen. The sealed wall stood open now, the broken boards leaning against the structure like something that had already been decided. Marjorie stopped a few feet from it, looked up. The crack running through the screen caught the light, thin and uneven, but no longer something that needed to be hidden. Just something that had been there. She let out a slow breath, then turned. There was work to do. She started small, the way she always had. The concession stand first. She pushed the door open, letting fresh air move through the stale space. The smell shifted slightly, less trapped, more manageable. She found an old bucket, filled it at the pump. Carried it back carefully, step by step. Water sloshed over the edge, darkening the dirt beneath her feet. She wiped down the counter. Slow strokes. No rush. The cloth turned gray almost immediately. Didn't matter. She rinsed it. Started again. Kaiser stayed near the doorway, watching. Not guarding, just present. The next day, she cleared the front, pulled weeds from the narrow path leading into the lot. Bent low, hands working steadily through dry roots and stubborn soil. Her back complained. Her knees reminded her of every year she had lived. She didn't stop. Because she knew something most people forgot. If you waited until you felt ready, you'd never begin. By the third day, the space had changed, not dramatically, but enough. The ground near the concession stand was visible now. The doorway cleared. The counter wiped down to wood again. Marjorie stood there, hands on her hips, looking out across the lot. It still stretched wide, still broken, still empty, but it no longer felt forgotten. Behind her, Kaiser moved. He walked out into the lot. Not to the sealed wall this time, not to that one spot. He moved through the space. Slow, measured, stopping at different points, looking out toward the screen, then back toward her. Mapping it, like he was learning it for the first time. Marjorie watched him. A small smile touched the corner of her mouth. "You think it could work?" she asked. Kaiser didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. She went back to town that afternoon. Not to think, to act. Clara looked up as she walked in, took one look at her face, and nodded. "You decided," she said. Marjorie slid onto the stool. "I did," Clara poured coffee. Set it down. Waited. I'm not selling, Marjorie said. The words came out simple. Clean. Clara let out a quiet breath. Figured you wouldn't. Marjorie glanced around the diner. A couple of regulars sat near the window. One of them glanced over, then looked away. Do you remember it? Marjorie asked. The drive-in. Clara smiled faintly. Used to go there with my sister, she said, back when gas was cheap and time felt longer than it really was. Marjorie nodded. I'm thinking about opening it, she said. The words landed between them. Clara didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it. She just leaned back slightly. Not for good, Marjorie added. Just one night. Clara studied her. You'd need power, she said. Projection, sound. I know. You don't have any of that. I know. Clara smiled again. This time wider. Well, she said, reaching for a notepad behind the counter. Then I guess we better start figuring it out. It didn't take long for the idea to move. Not fast, not loud, but steady. Clara mentioned it to a man who fixed generators. He mentioned it to someone who still had old equipment in a barn. A woman who had lived in town her whole life heard about it while buying groceries and told her husband. By the end of the week, people were talking. Back at the drive-in, Marjorie worked. Not alone anymore. A man named Lewis showed up one morning with a toolbox and no explanation. Another came with a ladder. A teenager with a truck brought a pile of scrap wood and asked where to drop it. They didn't stay long, didn't make speeches, just did what they came to do. And left. Kaiser watched all of it. At first he stayed close to Marjorie, watching each new person carefully. Learning. But as the days passed, he relaxed. Not fully, but enough. He moved through the lot with a different kind of purpose now. Not searching, not waiting. Part of it. The marquee was the last thing she touched. The letters were faded, some missing, some broken. She climbed the small ladder slowly, one step at a time, and began fitting what she could back into place. Clara stood below, holding the ladder steady. What are you putting? Clara asked. Marjorie paused, looked out over the lot, then back at the sign. One night only, she said. Clara smiled. That's enough. The evening they tested the lights. They didn't expect much. Lewis had managed to get a generator running. Old. Loud. But working. The wires were patched together. Temporary. Uncertain. Marjorie stood near the center of the lot. Kaiser beside her. Clara off to one side, arms folded. Lewis flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing. Then a flicker. The screen caught it. A pale wash of light spread unevenly across the cracked surface. Not perfect, not strong, but there, alive. Marjorie didn't say anything, didn't move. She just watched. The light held. Steady enough. Real enough. Kaiser sat. Not at the old spot, not near the wall. Here, beside her. Looking up. As if the thing he had been waiting for had finally begun. The first night didn't feel real. Marjorie stood near the edge of the lot as the sun slipped low, watching the sky turn that soft, dusty gold that only lasted a few minutes before fading. The sign was up. One night only. Hand-painted letters, slightly uneven, but clear. The generator sat humming behind the concession stand, a steady mechanical heartbeat cutting through the quiet. She wiped her hands on a cloth, more out of habit than necessity, and looked down the road. Nothing yet. Just dust and distance. Kaiser sat beside her. Not restless, not searching. Calm. His eyes followed the road the same way hers did. Waiting. The first car came just before sunset. An old pickup, slow. It rolled to a stop near the entrance, idled for a moment like it was asking permission, then pulled in. The driver stepped out, stood there a second, looked around, then gave a small nod, as if something inside him had settled. Marjorie nodded back. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He parked near the middle, sat on the tailgate, and waited. The second car came 10 minutes later, then another and another. By the time the light began to fade from the sky, the road carried a steady line of headlights, stretching back farther than she had expected. People stepped out slowly. Some stood by their cars. Some brought folding chairs. A few walked across the lot, looking around like they were trying to remember something they hadn't thought about in years. Voices stayed low, respectful, like the place deserved it. Clara moved behind the concession stand, working with practiced hands. The fryer hissed. The smell of popcorn drifted out across the lot. Familiar, comforting. Marjorie stood still, taking it in. Every car, every face, every quiet return. Kaiser moved through the space, weaving between people without touching them, without interrupting, just present. He didn't guard. He didn't search. He watched. By the time the last of the light disappeared, the lot was full. Not packed, but filled enough that the empty spaces no longer felt empty. Lewis climbed into the projection booth, gave a small wave down. Marjorie raised her hand in return. Then she stepped back, beside Kaiser, and waited. The lights went out. One by one, the hum of conversation softened. The air shifted. And then, the screen came alive. Not perfectly. The edges flickered slightly. The cracks still visible if you knew where to look. But none of that mattered. Because the light held. Strong enough. Clear enough. Real. A murmur moved through the crowd. Soft. Almost reverent. Marjorie felt something rise in her chest. Not overwhelming. Not sharp. Just steady. Like something finding its place again. It wasn't just a movie. Not really. The images moved across the screen, but what mattered was what happened in the dark. People leaned closer together, laughed quietly, pointed, remembered. A man 2 rows ahead wiped his eyes when a familiar scene came up. A woman behind him laughed at something only she understood. Clara leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching the crowd more than the screen. Marjorie stood there, not moving, not speaking, just watching. Kaiser lay down beside her, head resting on his paws, eyes open, content. Later, when the movie ended and the lights came back slowly, no one rushed to leave. They stayed, talking, lingering, like stepping away too fast might break something. Marjorie moved through them, not directing, not leading, just there, present. A man stopped her near the edge of the lot. "Thank you," he said. Simple. Clear. She nodded. Didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. The cars left one by one, headlights disappearing down the road. The noise faded. The night settled back in. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one felt full. Marjorie stood in the center of the lot long after the last car had gone. Kaiser rose slowly beside her, stretched, then sat again. Close. The screen stood ahead, still, white, waiting, but not empty. Not anymore. The nights after that came easier. Not perfect, not busy every time, but steady. People returned. Not all at once, not in crowds, but enough. Enough to keep the light on. Enough to keep the place alive. Marjorie found a rhythm. Mornings at the pump. Afternoons fixing what she could. Evenings watching the road. Kaiser stayed with her. Always. Not watching the wall anymore. Not waiting for something hidden. That part was done. Now he watched the people, the movement, the life coming back. One evening, just before sunset, Marjorie noticed someone standing near the fence. A girl, maybe 14. Backpack slung over one shoulder, shoes worn down at the edges. She stood just outside the entrance, not coming in, not leaving, just there, watching. Marjorie didn't call out, didn't wave. She walked over slowly, Kaiser at her side. The girl shifted slightly when they got close, ready to move, but not yet. "You hungry?" Marjorie asked. The girl hesitated, then nodded, just once. Marjorie reached for the gate, opened it, stepped back. "You can come in," she said. "Stay as long as you need." The girl looked at her, then at Kaiser, then back at the open space beyond. And slowly, she stepped through. Kaiser moved aside to give her room. Calm, certain. Marjorie watched her walk in, then close the gate behind them. Not locking it, just closing it. That night, as the screen lit up again and the first images moved across the white surface, Marjorie stood beside the girl, beside Kaiser, and looked out over the lot to people, light. All of it held together by something simple, something quiet, something that didn't need to be explained. She had lost a house, a place, a life that had closed behind her. But standing there now, she understood something she hadn't before. Sometimes what disappears doesn't leave. It waits. Quiet. Unnoticed. Until someone comes back. Until someone stays. And when they do, it begins again. Not the same. But enough. Always enough. Kaiser leaned lightly against her leg. The girl sat on a folding chair watching the screen. The light moved across their faces. And for the first time in a long while, Marjorie didn't feel like she was standing outside of something. She was inside it. Right where she was meant to be. She was inside it. Right where she was meant to be. The light from the screen moved across her hands, soft and steady, like it knew where to land. Marjorie didn't look at the movie. She looked at the people. At the girl sitting just a few feet away, leaning forward without realizing it. At Kaiser, stretched out beside her, finally still in a way he hadn't been since the day she lost everything. At the quiet shape of a place that had waited longer than anyone had. He had known. Before the letter, before the photographs, before she understood anything at all.
Kaiser had sat at the wall and refused to leave it alone, not because there were money behind it, because there was something unfinished, something that needed to be found, something she needed to see. Marjorie let out a slow breath. On that time, she thought she had been the one left behind. But standing here now, she could feel it clear as anything. Some things don't disappear when they are over, they just go quiet and wait for the right person to come back and notice it. She reached down, resting her hand against Kaiser's side. He didn't move, didn't need to. Out on the lot, a few cars shifted. Someone laughed softly. The Rochester licked as the wheel turned. Life, returning its small speed, not perfect, but real. Marjorie looked out at it on one more time, her eyes settling on the open gate behind them, still unlocked, still open, and she wondered how many people are out there right now, thinking something in their life is gone for good, when it's just waiting for them to come back and see it.